think that small talk, at least I believe this, is the appetizer for a relationship. So whether you're talking about a business relationship, if you continue to do business, but business can be seeking volunteers for your church. Business can be seeking out dollars for one of your favorite charities. It is the appetizer for a friendship. It starts with small talk and then it develops into a real friendship. And small talk is the appetizer for a romantic relationship. It starts with chit chat and then it moves into something deeper and a real romantic relationship if you go the next step. So I used to think small talk was a waste of saliva. Why would you want to learn to talk about that? To me, I thought, well, that's the weather or talking about the Denver Broncos. But it is so much more. It's the picture frame around a big conversation.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Finishing Strong podcast. I've been off the podcast radar for the past few months. I was deeply involved with our company and the sale of the company. My wife and I have been remodeling our home. We've been trying to sneak in some travel as well. But I'm excited though, after all of that, for the first time in my life, I have my retirement date set and it's May 31st, 2024. And it'll be fun to talk about that in the coming months. I'm excited to be back with you on the podcast, sharing this time with some friends I know you will enjoy and love. Today, we're joined by author and international speaker, Deb Fine. For several decades, Deb has been guiding people in the fine art of small talk. Deb began her career as an engineer, which allowed her to maintain her natural shyness and avoid those situations that required her social interactions. But some significant changes in her life compelled her to initiate friendships, hone her mingling skills, and embrace this need to be able to converse with anyone. I've known Deb for a long time. She's a friend and neighbor. Our kids know each other. I've just really watched her grow in her career over these decades. She has appeared in the Today Show, CBS Sunday Morning. She's been interviewed by every periodical, including the New York Times, Psychology Today, AARP, USA Today, Boston Globe, and then most recently, Real Simple Magazine did an article where they interviewed her extensively, and the title of the article is perfect: 10 Tips for Making Small Talk Less Awkward. Deb published her first book, The Fine Art of Small Talk. Get it? Deb Fine, The Fine Art. She published that in 2002 and just recently released her updated 2023 version. Almost everyone, and including me, says the same thing about small talk. I hate it. But as Deb says, small talk helps lead you to real talk. I know you will enjoy hearing from Deb and learning some new skills for engaging in conversation with friends and strangers. Deb, thank you so much for joining us. You and I have known each other for a long time, been in lots of spin classes together and run into each other at the grocery store. So thank you for being with me today.
It's my joy, and I've watched your kids grow into beautiful, blossoming, self-supporting adults. So that's been my privilege as well.
Well, thanks. Key piece, self-supporting. So I've known about your topic for years. You and I were in Rotary in I think it was late 90s, early 2000s. That's when I first, encountered your message and what you were doing with this message of small talk, right? And the art of small talk, the fine art of small talk, since it's Deb Fine, which is really creative. But you've had the book, you've been on the speaking circuit for a long time, but you just come out with a new edition. So tell us about new edition. What's different about this?
Well, the first book was written in 2001 and published in 2002. So there were some things in there, Jamie, that none of us have anymore, like video stores. So there were mentioned anecdotes from then, references to John Elway being still a quarterback for the Denver Broncos and having at that point not having won a Super Bowl. So little embarrassing. I could go on. But in addition to eliminating that, adding a lot. So there's a whole chapter on political discourse, engaging people in conversation if you can, if you see things differently, or you're like-minded, but to manage a political conversation. There's a chapter on interacting with people who are experiencing transition and or grief or illness, the right things to say, the wrong things to say. There's a chapter about virtual interactions, because even what you and I were just able to, now we're friends, so it's easier, but oftentimes now we have our interactions with people virtually. And because it's technology, we forget that that's ingredient of small talk is just equally as important, if not more possibly, I don't know. So certain tools and skills you can use when you interact virtually. So in addition to that, some references to gender, and also a big change was there's a whole chapter for singles, which isn't something you and I are concerned with, but many people are. And I'll tell you, when I first wrote the book, there was no Tinders or whatever these apps are. So, there's a way to talk to people virtually via a dating app and to take it to the next level. So that's how it's been enhanced and improved.
You also acknowledge or reference often the impact of the pandemic on us, right? And so that reference and that frame of reference for us is important. So how is that? Describe that political mess of conversation that we've had for the last 3 years, along with the kind of the combination of that and the pandemic. What guidance are you giving people around navigating those conversations?
Well, my favorite thing to say to somebody, whether they disagree with me and or I'm uncertain of their position, or I don't want to go down a rabbit hole that might be controversial, because more often than not, unless you're within my family, I'm probably not going to go that route with you. So my favorite thing to say to somebody in those situations is help me understand. For instance, I would say to you, Jamie, if you held a position different than I did about when we should have stopped wearing masks, or if we should have, I would have just said, because you are my friend, and I don't want to just go like this. That's ridiculous. How can you think that? It's even when you interact with teenagers and or even adult children on occasion, I've heard myself say, so help me understand why you feel that way, because then at least you're listening and at least you're letting them talk and you're truly there. The thing about the pandemic, I think, combined, Jamie, with technology, is that there's this epidemic of loneliness, which you did not mention, but I think the work that you're doing is so important, first of all, because the demographics have grown and grown and grown in the arena that you speak to, which is people retiring or transitioning in their lives, and yet wanting to either reconnect or connect altogether. I mean, oftentimes you want to move into a different area. You certainly aren't raising kids anymore at our age, et cetera, et cetera. And because of the pandemic, because people were so isolated, I think there is an epidemic of loneliness as well.
Yeah.
And division, political division too, hasn't helped that either, I don't think.
So let's the audience, most of the people are going to be listening to this, unless it's a some referral, but most of the people are in our age group and are at some level of transitioning from working full-time to something else. And then maybe I'm just thinking about it. I'm there. I've been in it a while. As you said, maybe they've moved, they've gone to a community, or they're thinking about going someplace. And the one thing that I've learned through all the research I've done is this season of our life cannot be done in isolation. It's the worst thing we can possibly do is extricate ourselves from our community or our family or whatever and just isolate. And so bring that into some of your counsel. And I love your line that something like this, because I hear people all the time go, oh, I just hate small talk. I don't want to go there. There's a bunch of small talk. But your line says you can't get to real talk unless you start with some small talk. So guide us through that transition of small to real.
Well, I think that small talk, at least I believe this, is the appetizer for a relationship. So whether you're talking about a business relationship, if you continue to do business, but business can be seeking volunteers for your church. Business can be seeking out dollars for one of your favorite charities. It is the appetizer for a friendship. It starts with small talk and then it develops into a real friendship. And small talk is the appetizer for a romantic relationship. It starts with chit chat and then it moves into something deeper and a real romantic relationship if you go the next step. So I used to think small talk was a waste of saliva. Why would you want to learn to talk about that? To me, I thought, well, that's the weather or talking about the Denver Broncos. But it is so much more. It's the picture frame around a big conversation. It starts with small talk. For me to say something as simple as, well, Jamie, I know about your family. I even know your kids' names. I know your wife's name. So it's much easier. But let's pretend you're somebody that I ran into once a year, or I haven't seen for 8 years because we used to work together. Instead of saying, how are the kids? Or how's work? What if you don't work anymore? Or putting that label on you. My favorite way to start with you is, catch me up, Jamie. What's new in your life since the last time I saw you? If I don't know I know details about you because I just social media, et cetera, et cetera. So pretend you're somebody else. Or I might say, if I do know you have kids, and don't make assumptions about anybody, instead of saying, how are the kids? I'd say, bring me up to date on the kids. If I knew you retired, instead of saying, how's retirement, where you can say, oh, busy or great, and I'm not getting anywhere with you, because I do want to have a relationship with you, I would say, catch me up. You know, what's retirement been like for you? Give me some highlights or give me some lowlights. You know, just tell me what's been going on with retirement. Here's the key, is that if we use small talk to sort of dig in and get to the heart of something, then it's okay to even learn more. So, Jamie, why did you do it that way? Or why did you choose this course? Or Jamie, when you come back from your work in Africa, what would you say is the #1 challenge when you've been there? What has been to have a real conversation with you and learn from you? That's what real friends do, or real connected people do with one another. Even spouses need to do that, right? I mean, my husband at the end of today, the end of my work day, is going to say to me, how was your day? That's what every spouse says to everybody. But even at our age, if you are married, if you have a special person in your life, it's important to really connect and have real conversations, not just about the kids, but about each other. And you can't do that by saying, how was your day? Good. What's new? Nothing. What's for dinner?
Yeah. Well, I've noticed over the years for you do a couple of things in communication. One, you have a genuine interest, not just asking the question, you have a genuine interest in hearing the answer.
Right.
And then you make a connection. If I answer a question, then you're tying it to something else we did, or something else we saw, or something else you saw, and you bring the connection. So take me to the grocery store. You're seeing that familiar person, like we saw each other not too long ago. What's your first thought, or do you actually have your prepared questions kind of ready for you?
I do have prepared questions. So if you invited me to your house for a party, I would be prepared. And I would also try to find out who else is going to be there. So I would be prepared for that. But most at the grocery store, even at most parties, you don't know who's going to be there. So what I like to do, though, is be prepared in this way. I always have 2 to 3 things to talk about before I enter a party. Before I would enter church or synagogue, I would have 2 to 3 things to talk about for after services, when it's time to mingle. But let's go back to the grocery store example. The example is, if I have an agenda, anybody who watches Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David, he coined this phrase, Jamie. He is opposed to the stop and chat. So if I didn't have time to stop and chat with you when I was checking out my groceries or going down the aisle, I would be very civil and go, hi, great to see you. And I'd keep walking. We're not obligated to chat with people just because they're there. However, when the last time I encountered you, I did have the time. I didn't know if you had the time. You were very friendly and you said hello first, and you exuded your energy, which is always positive and warm and outgoing, but I still wasn't sure you had time. You might have been in a hurry to get to your car to do whatever. So I responded, and then I showed more interest when I realized, oh, he answered the first question, he might answer the second. And because also I had the time to show an interest. And so that's another key. When you have the time to show an interest in people, assume the burden of doing that. And that's the key to most of the work that I do, Jamie. And, anybody listening to your work that knows you even a little bit knows you're a very caring individual and you believe in service to others. Okay. So this isn't as big as what you do, but I'm going to ask people as individuals to think, how can I serve others today beyond being just kind? Being kind is important, but I'm going to assume the burden for your comfort when I interact with you. So if I'm at the grocery store, I'm going to assume the burden of showing the interest in you. I'm not going to hope that you show an interest in me. If I'm walking down the hall with you in a hotel lobby, going to catch my Uber, I'm going to assume the burden of talking to you. If I'm at a table of 8, if I'm mingling, I have grandkids now. When I'm watching the oldest play soccer, I actually say to other parents, just what I did when my kids were growing up. Tell me about your child, because I'm assuming the burden of approaching them. I don't expect anybody to walk up to a grandmother, but they didn't walk up to the mother either. If they would hang out in their cliques and talk to each other. Yeah. And if I wanted to make friends, then it was up to me to assume that burden. And so I would say to anybody, even if you're shy or introverted, it's nobody else's burden but ours to approach other people, to show that I have a genuine interest in you, but it's not because you're so special. It's because I do in everyone, unless they're a class A jerk. And for your audience to know this, because I painted this picture of, oh, we're such good friends. I will say, without divulging too much, is actually we have opposing views on many things that are important. We don't have opposing values, we have opposing views. And yet I call you friend. That's another important thing. It's like, you show an interest in me. I think you know that I'm different than you in that way. And I show an interest in you, because people are people, and that's how you learn. Our kids have to grow up together. We're all in the same world. So that's where small talk is important too, is cultivating these connections helps us connect communities that are different to one another. And by the way, when I walk into a room, I look for somebody standing by themselves. And I wish everybody at church or synagogue would do that, or a volunteer project. Look for somebody standing by themselves. Don't look for the people you already know. That person has nobody to talk to. They would just love it if you walked up to them and started a conversation.
So great example. And I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, or commented on who you are at your core. You have a genuine interest in that. And yet in both your books, in your stories and your speaking, you describe yourself as whether it's a recovering introvert or a former introvert, an engineer who at one point in your life just loved to be doing data and cranking out the spreadsheets and cranking out the analysis and so forth. But you had a shift for a variety of life change, and you had a shift. So you had a need and a want to shift. But can people develop a curiosity? Can people develop a desire to engage with people?
I believe that they can, if they spend enough time to enjoy the rewards. Like saying to me in my other life, oh, you'll love exercise, Deb. I mean, I get so high from running, and people would say that to me all the time. Oh, you'll just love it. Well, I exercise every day, Jamie, and I still don't love it. Just throwing that out. Okay? Yeah. But I get so many rewards from it that I do it. But it took me a while to reap the rewards. They didn't come automatically. Movement creates its own rewards, right? Any kind of movement. So if you have so many friends and you're so connected to your family and your spouse and your partners and the people you work with, and hooray for you. But I don't think anybody gets to stand in that aura of that. I think that we all will gain rewards if we invest in reaching out to people, making connections, and keeping the connections, staying in touch. I have to assume that burden as well. So for somebody like me, who still is an introvert, but I'm no longer shy, I'm ask anybody, my favorite thing to do is to read books. I'm if you ever want to know some good, I always have at least 2 books, because that is really who I am. I would rather be at home reading a book than go to your house to a party. But if I do see you, I behave like an extrovert, because my joy in life is the reward it reaps: friendship, kindness, networking, just so much joy in my life to know people. And so I would say to anybody, examine why you won't do this. Is it because you hate it, because you don't know how to do it? Because I used to hate running, because I thought running was running. I didn't know you could jog, because nobody could help me. Of course, I didn't ask for any advice either. So I would say to you, if you're willing to learn how to do it and you try it and make it a task in your life, at least for a few months, and you don't see the rewards, okay, quit, call it a day. But I think most people who hate small talk hate it for the same reason I did, is because I didn't know how to do it. So it's easy. It's like I hated exercise because I didn't know how to do it. Some people hate lots of things because they don't do it well.
Yeah. So some practical application for us, and you and I laughed a little bit about this through our exchange in preparation. So part of small talk is also helping to navigate a discussion. So one of my biggest fears, if I go to that person and I start small talk, oh my gosh, they're not going to stop talking, and their stories are going to take forever. And they're not going to ask me anything about me. They're just going to want to talk about them, right? And some of that can come from nervousness, some of that's style, some of that's narcissism. What pick whatever it is, it's in there. But those are people we engage all the time. You're at the party, and you decided to talk to that person. It turns out they were an extrovert, and now they've got you cornered, and the 2 of you are there, and you can't get away. How do you navigate that time of a conversation?
Well, I'm going to give you some exit lines in a moment. But before I do that, I'll say, because we often describe other people as being monopolizers, people that are, as you described, extroverts, have their stories to tell, and they're out there. There's no doubt about it. But when I have an audience in front of me of 500 or 5,000, I'll say, okay, everybody who's a monopolizer, raise your hand. How many hands do you think go up, Jamie? So who are these people? Or do they live on Mars and just come visit us at parties? No, they don't. They're us. They're all of us. So before we talk about what we can do to get away from them, or possibly make some shifts in conversation, I just want to throw out what my rule is for myself. I'm not allowed to talk about myself for more than 3 or 4 minutes. So if you ask me about my vacation, my kids, my work, it doesn't matter. After, I'll give you a real answer. Because if I don't give you a real answer, I call it playing the conversation game. If I don't give you a real answer in a sentence, if I don't offer self-disclosure, how are you going to get to know me? I've got to give something up besides a 1-word answer. So I'll give something up. And then if you show an interest in what I gave up, my vacation, my kids, whatever, I'm allowed to talk about myself for 3 or 4 minutes. And then I have to take the conversation ball and throw it back to you. That is my rule. And everyone listening, when somebody shows an interest in something fabulous that you're doing, or because you have a grandchild, you lose track of time. Stop losing track of time. You get 3 or 4 minutes max before you have to throw that ball back to the other person and show an interest in them. All right. And if everybody did that, wouldn't that be a wonderful world, Jamie? But at least we can control ourselves. Okay, so a couple things. When you have a monopolizer on your hands, you can try to change the topic. Gosh, your golf game sounds wonderful. You went to Scotland, you went to all those courses. So I'm going to show appreciation, or acknowledge something that I heard. Wow, this new project you started, it sounds like you have a great passion for it. I'm going to try to acknowledge something and say it in a truthful way. And then I'm either going to change the topic and say, so tell me, what do you see down the line for, with, what have you planted in your garden this year? Because I planted this, this, and this. So I disclose and try to change the course of the conversation. Now, if that person starts talking about their garden ad nauseum, then I've got a real monopolizer on my hand. So now I want to exit that person. I mean, unless it's your mother-in-law, then maybe you need to show more grace, right? If it's your boss, you have to show more grace. So but what I do is I'll say, oh, that, your kid sounds amazing, or hooray for you and all the effort you put into that project. I've got a couple of minutes before I need to take off. I see Jamie White's over there, and he's a friend. I haven't seen him for a while. I want to catch up with him before it's time to go. So tell me before I take off, what would you say the number one ingredient to your success has been? I've let him know, Jamie, this is almost over. This is almost over. And you can get out of this with dignity if you will wrap it up and give me an answer to the question of what do you think the number one ingredient was to your success? Gosh, your grandchild sounds amazing that she's going to be an Olympian and be in like Ivy League schools. That's amazing. Before I want to make sure I get around to the other women at the baby shower that I haven't met, because, they're all friends of the mom and I don't really know anybody here, but before I do that, I want to know, what do you see as like their number one career, that they probably want to be now that will probably change? What do you think that is? Astronaut, scientist? What do you think it is? And then I'll go on my way. Now, if that person keeps babbling about their kid, I'll say, I really want to meet other people here before I go. I don't want the hostess to think I was a snob, and I'm on my way.
Great suggestion there. So you've got lots of tips in your book and in articles and in your speaking. There was a recent article that the magazine Real Simple published and called the 10 tips for making small talk less awkward. And you're quoted, throughout the article, but let me ask you about a couple of them. And you've hit on this a little bit already. So let me just throw out a couple. Arrive with questions. And you told me that if you're coming to our house for dinner, you have a couple questions. In your book, you actually give us some icebreaker questions, but you're coming to the White House. What are some questions you're going to come with?
Okay. How did you pick this neighborhood? So here's the best way to launch a conversation with anybody, anywhere. Use free information about the occasion or location. So if the location is his house, their house, how did you pick this neighborhood? Are you from here? Are you from this neighborhood? I mean, did you grow up here? If you did, I'll ask if you ever thought about another place. Or I just might say, are you from Colorado? Did you grow up in Colorado? I don't know if I remember. I think I do know the answer. But in most cases, I'm invited to a party where I don't know people. That's exactly what I would say. If I met you at church or synagogue, I'd say, how did you hear about the church? The free information I have is the location. What prompted you to become a member? Here's free information. What did you think about the sermon today? Because that was the occasion. How do you know the host or hostess? That's free information about the occasion. I'm at the Boulder. You're standing in line with me. I've never met you. Have you ever done this before? That's free information. So that's one way I prepare myself. There's free information about anything you're attending. Now, if I'm in your home, I'll look for free information in your possessions. And what I mean by that is if there's a diploma, if there's artwork, if there's pictures of children or grandchildren. Now, if I don't know you have children or grandchildren, if I don't know that, I won't say, are these your kids? Don't ever say that, people. Unless you know an answer to a question, don't put somebody in a bad spot. I will say, tell me about these pictures. That's what I would say. And then you can say, oh, these are my children, these are my nephews. That people do crazy things. They say, are you married? What kind of question is that? If you don't know the answer to that question, that means we're just at the beginning of a relationship, possibly, but we certainly are strangers, right? We don't know each other very well. I'm not going to ask you, are you married? And then I'm certainly not going to ask you, do you have any kids? Because you will either say no, and then we're down that rabbit hole. I feel terrible. Or you're going to say yes. And so many people won't shut up if they have kids. So here's my favorite way to get to know somebody. So here's the second question I come in prepared with. These are just generic without knowing anything about the occasion or location. What keeps you busy? So Jamie, if I didn't know anything about you and I met you for the first time, because let's say Rhonda is my girlfriend and I know her from the gym, but I've never met you, I don't know you. I'm not going to say, what do you do, Jamie? Some people are in transition. Some people are out of work. Some people don't want to be labeled for what they do for work. So I would say, outside of hosting this party, Jamie, or outside of being married to Rhonda, what keeps you busy? Yeah. If I meet you at a Rotary meeting or a volunteer event, I'll say, what keeps you busy outside of Rotary? If I meet you at a baby shower or a wedding, what keeps you busy outside of attending this wedding? And you will tell me what you're willing to let me know. Oh, well, my kids keep me busy. And you'll start talking about your kids. Oh, I do yoga. Oh, I'm in school for my MBA. When you say what keeps you busy, fill in the blank, or what keeps you busy outside of whatever it is, work, if I'm at work with you, you learn about people without pigeonholing them, without them thinking you're doing the FBI agent routine. And here's the FBI agent routine. Jamie, what do you do? So let's try that. Jamie, what do you do?
I've got an initiative called Finishing Strong and lead that.
And where are you from? Are you from Colorado? Or are you from somewhere else?
Not from somewhere else, Florida.
Okay. What your listeners have just witnessed is an FBI agent at work.
Yeah, just
I asked him what he did, and
I do that so much.
But I got an interesting answer. I started an initiative. Don't you think I should have asked about that before I pounded you with like, where are you from?
Yeah.
So many of us do that. And that's why conversations sort of just either run out of steam, never launch, or I feel interviewed. Just whatever you start with. If you are at an industry conference, if it is work related, it is okay to say to somebody, in my opinion, so what kind of work do you do, or what kind of work brought you to this conference?
Yeah.
And then when they tell you that they're an estate attorney, then say to that person, well, what's a typical day like for you? Or how'd you get into that? Or just stay on topic so we have a real conversation, because it says, Jamie said early on, why do people hate small talk? Well, that would be a good example why people might hate small talk, because they don't really connect.
Yeah. Well, you do a great job. And again, the follow-up question, but you're also interested in that. And I am too. If someone tells me they've got started a business and you give a lot of guidance around open-ended questions rather than, oh, what's the name of the business? FBI question. Where's it located? FBI question. Describe that business to me. What are you guys trying to accomplish in your mission? Describe
How did you come up with that idea, Jamie? I mean, that is the first thing I would ask you, to tell you the truth, But and then the next time, can I say the next time I see you, and this is important, everybody. So he's not a close friend. So I would put him in the label of an acquaintance. Jamie is an acquaintance. So what if his initiative fails, folks? Okay, we don't think it's going to. It's like when somebody gets a new job. If they're an acquaintance, the next time you run into them, you extroverts out there, you charismatic people, you don't get to say, how's it going at Wells Fargo? Because you have such a great memory that you remembered he had this is what you say. What's new with work since the last time I saw you? So in Jamie's case, I'd probably say, bring me up to date. What's new in your life since the last time I saw you? So you could tell me what you wanted me to know. Well, I've been working hard on that initiative, and now I know. Oh, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So a lot of people at this season, and there's a term coined for it out there. I don't remember what it is. When if they have left full-time work and they're now doing something else, they're asked the question, what do you do? And the default is, well, I was a periodontist. I was a lawyer. I used to do this. And gosh, it's gonna. I know now I'm retiring in about a year, and so I'm kind of almost practicing that. What am I gonna say differently? So, what guidance would you give the person who has left a very honorable, and it doesn't have to be a fancy world of career, but they spent 40 years doing something that they identified with. Their work was their identity, and now they've lost that identity. What does that answer look like from that to that person?
I think the important thing is remembering that it's up to us to assume the burden. They may not know you are retired. And if they do, they might not know what to say. So I'm going to assume the burden of their comfort. Let's pretend I retire in 6 months and somebody runs into, or you run into me and say, how's work? I would not only say, well, I've decided to leave work behind. I've retired, but then I play the conversation game. I'm spending my time with my grandchildren, and I'm spending more time volunteering via my Rotary Club. I'd give you something to talk with me about. Let's say those things don't apply in my life. Pretend I don't have grandchildren, pretend I'm not a Rotarian. Say, how's work, Deborah? Well, I decided to, just shut the business down, wanted to just enjoy retirement, but now I spend more time at the gym. I'm reading more books. It's been a whole new transition for me. So now guess what I've given you? Ask me what book I'm reading, or are there any books that I would recommend? Or so what are you doing differently at the gym that you're spending more time, and are you enjoying that? Tell me about that. so you've got to give people something to talk about with you instead of saying, well, I'm retired. Now, just this morning, I was at Rotary, and there was a woman that sat down at our table that I've never had a chance to really talk to. And she's a high-level CEO of UC Health, Sylvia Young. And I've known of her, she's joined, but for some reason, I just have never sat with her. So I said to her initially, I said, you're retired, right? And Sylvia said, I am retired. Well, first of all, I showed an interest in her right away. The minute she sat down at the table, here's my opportunity. And then I said, so what's keeping you busy in retirement? And she was ready for me because she's busy. She's on boards now and she's doing whatever there was a lot to talk about. So if you're not busy because you just want to hang out and sort of sort this out. And when somebody says, so what are you up to? Say, I retired and I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm leaning some ways, other ways I'm not sure. And then they can say, well, what ways are you leaning? But give more than a one-word answer. Help. Yeah. And you'd be surprised, like this is how we learn about things. So I find out you're retired and you're looking to leave. And I say to you, well, why don't you come to my Rotary Club? I mean, that's how I find out about people to invite. Are you interested in this? Are you interested in that? And if you're not willing to disclose something about yourself, how are people going to connect you to other people?
Yeah, makes sense. Well, in my opinion, you are a great example of finishing strong. You're in this season of life where you could be hanging up the cleats and being done. And so what is as you look to your next 5 years, what do those look like? What is going to keep you busy over the next 5 years? And what are you doing now to finish this both career and this season of your life stronger?
Thank you for asking that. And I just love finishing strong. I think I'm constantly telling myself to move, and I move a lot because I know the more we move, the more our body will work for us. And that's what finishing strong is moving our brains, our hearts, our bodies, so that whatever our finish is, we're strong, or as strong as we can be. Because there's other challenges that will get in our way, but as strong as we can be. So for me, I really don't look past to the next year, because because of COVID, I changed my thinking. I used to build this business took an extraordinary amount of time and energy and chutzpah. I mean, it was cold calling all the time, and I really built it up. And then COVID came along, and it didn't end it, but it changed it and it juggled it. And then all of a sudden we were back in business, and I decided I don't need to hustle anymore. So I'm going to spend the next 5 years enjoying my career, which is speaking in front of audiences. I just love doing that. And I'm going to enjoy my grandchildren and my children. I'm going to enjoy my husband and traveling with him. So I'm going to enjoy my good health. I think in a way, what I've retired is ambition. And I never was an ambitious person career-wise. If somebody asked me who I was, I would always say mom. I was always a mother first, a parent first. But now my identity is about bringing joy instead of worrying about the bottom line. And I think that's what retirement is, the gift that it's going to give me, that it's already given me, is that I could retire today, but I don't have to. And I have a job I love. So speaking of the periodontist, that's a wonderful example of someone who did not love his work. And why wouldn't you love your work if you were a periodontist? I know why, because everybody that sat in the chair started to cry, or was upset, or didn't want to pay their bill, or didn't want to be there, or when their gums were repaired from surgery, would rather have a new dress. So for him, it's a relief and peace. I don't want to lose. I get great joy being with audiences and people. So I have not thought of, finishing strong for me is being able to pick up those grandchildren until I'm 98 years old. That's finishing strong, right?
That's awesome. Well, you've done a great job along the way, and I can't wait to have a front row seat to to watching you in the future as well. So thanks for joining us. We're putting all of the your website and some of these things in the show notes and reference. And so for people who are listening here, you can check out Deb's website. You'll see her book as well as her contact information on our website at www.finishing-strong.org. Was too common of a name. I had to get a little creative with that.
Yeah.
But again, Deb, thanks so much for being with us today, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining our Finishing Strong podcast today with our guest, Deb Fine. You can learn more about Deb at her website, www.debrafine.com, and you can get her latest version of The Fine Art of Small Talk on Amazon. Hey, if you or someone you know is interested in discovering how they can live with purpose in this next season of their life, check out our resources or our next weekend at www.finishing-strong.org.